everyone, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. We're on our side quest right now because it is Oscars season. And if we don't get to all these Oscar movies before the ceremonies, something bad is going to happen. So today we are talking about Drive My Car. It's from 2021, of course. It's directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. It's a film with, a lot of elements to it, a lot of things to discuss. Perhaps the film is deep. Perhaps there's another message to it. Who knows? I want to talk about it with you guys. That's why we're here on the Quest for the Bestest. But before we talk about this film, we've got to rewind to last episode in which we talked about King Richard. It got an average score of 7.8. Pretty close scores across the board. And so that threw it at the number 4 place on our list. Who knows where the top spot will finally go to once we get through all 10 Best Picture nominees. But we will, by the time the ceremony comes, have a pick for Best Picture, and who knows whether or not the Academy will line up with it or not. Whether or not it does, though, we will be talking about the winner after it's all done. I just want to dive right into this film so bad, but I do believe we have to do a featured comment that Tanner has pulled up for us. Just sock it to me right now, Tanner.
Yeah. I'll sock it to you, or in more of a sense, John Tour 11 will sock it to you with his comment on King Richard. As a huge sports fan, I usually find that biopics about athletes are not that interesting. All they do is train and compete. And it turns out that a biopic about the dollar sign-eyed father that is not that interesting either. Sorry. I am not so sure about the Best Actor win for Smith. As Tucker mentioned, the role is very safely written. And Will Smith doesn't have much to work with either. He abbreviated Will Smith. I was confused for a second there. I would be disappointed if he wins the Oscar. That said, the careers of Venus and Serena are fascinating. This movie just isn't, in my opinion. Everything is just far too safe for me. I think this is the weakest film so far. 5.5 out of 10.
Okay. Wow. Interesting thoughts from John Tor right there. One day, okay, I'm just going to throw this out there. One day we got to get John Tor on the phone as a guest appearance in The Voice on Quest. I think it's due.
I agree.
It's due,
I agree.
Yes.
All right, but before that happens, I want to hear about Drive My Car from the man in the turtleneck who he sort of looks like our main character in some scenes who likes to wear a turtleneck a little bit. Abram, what are your thoughts on this film?
I think this was boring.
Howdy.
Here's the thing about Drive My Car. I think that this is one of the most... let's lay it all out there, because I have a very, I would say, contradictory take on this movie. I think this is one of the most engrossing screenplays that I've got to enjoy in a long time. I think that the fact that the film can carry entire scenes just in the backseat of a car, 2 characters talking back and forth, is a testament to incredible writing. And I think the film is beautiful. Not only does it have an amazing color palette, I think that they play with cinematography in subtle but really stark ways. I love how many shots we have where the subject is so small in the frame. I think it's a really compelling movie, but goddamn is it boring, in my opinion. I mean, 3 hours for this just doesn't feel right to me, because at first I was happy with the pace. When I got to 45 minutes in, and then the title, like the credits started playing, I'm like, oh, so this is what I'm in for. But in fact, when you get, 2 hours, 15 minutes into the movie, something actually happens. And it triggers an actual sequence of plot, events, and character reveals that feels like all of a sudden, what did I just do the last 2 hours and 15 minutes for? I feel like to attract me, the non-Kino viewer here on the Back Lot Banter panel, the movie should have been structured differently, from my perspective. But nonetheless, frankly, I think this is one of the most impressive films we've watched for the entirety of Quest for the Bestest.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, in case you didn't know, besides from the turtleneck, Abram was not appearing on a Backlog Banter special episode of Back Lot Banter, which we did a little while ago for the month of January, talking about this film because Tucker, Tanner, and I had actually saw it in the theater and wanted to talk about it right off the bat. And so, if you want to hear our more initial thoughts about the film, go check that out. But this is an entirely new review. We've got another subject here. A lot of us, we watched it the second time, and so there's new things to be brought up here. Who wants to go next and talk about this film?
Tucker Hazel.
Yeah.
You look like you want to go next, Tucker.
I'll offer myself as tribute. Drive My Car is a very interesting movie because I think it steps away from storytelling conventions on the whole. I think what Abrams was talking about and the fact that it is able to convey such fascinating conversations through very simplistic framing and situations is a testament to how engrossing I found the world and characters to be from a very subtle human level. This movie is very, I use the word as we walked out of from the theater, dry. And we kind of had a discussion of, is that an insult, is it not? But I personally mean it as a compliment in just, I feel that the tone of this movie is flat and no one really reacts too crazily to everything, and things happen at a pace that makes sense for real life. And that's really interesting. It's very unique. It's very fresh. And for that, I find it to be an incredibly engrossing movie, unlike most things I ever watch. I can understand totally why you would find this boring. And there certainly are sequences where I'm like, all right, we've had quite a few of these shots of a car far away listening to the guy recite his lines. I could do with, one or two less of those to keep the pacing moving a little bit more. I think maybe a little bit of editing would have improved the overall engrossment of the film. But when we're talking about 3 hours of a movie where, on the whole, not a lot happens, these characters are very subtle, their character arcs are very subtle until the end when it becomes revealed, but I'm able to stay engaged for 3 hours and become engrossed in the world of a film that doesn't have the flashy, comedic, over-the-top nonsense that I personally enjoy in a lot of my favorite films. That's very impressive. And because of that, holy shit, yes, this is one of my favorite movies of last year. It's one of my favorite movies that we've watched for this show, for even the larger quest for the bestest. I think it's quite phenomenal.
Okay, all right. Tanner, do you want to go next? Or I'm giving you the chance. If you want to shirk it off onto me, I will go next. If you want to save yourself for the last.
I feel like you always go last, so I'll let you go this time. How about that?
All right.
Yeah.
Tucker, you're bringing up subtleism makes me think about this film in conversation with the rest of our Best Picture nominees this year. And the one that most aptly is brought into conversation in comparison with this is Power of the Dog.
Definitely.
In it's real subdued, real. You got to really watch this film. You got to pay attention and read into the subtle facial expressions and the way the camera subtly tries to express what the characters are feeling like inside. But I think this film just does almost all of those elements better. I think that, like Abrams said, the screenplay is really fantastic. I think that the acting and the directing of this film are just on this level of control that you rarely see elsewhere. I think that because it's so subdued, that is so clearly intentional. It is what the director is going for, what Hamaguchi was trying, and that something like that isn't very easy to achieve. And so for me, while I was watching this film, I was just living in it and just really trying to figure out, first of all, what is it really saying to me and what is going on, but also just enjoying and seeing what's happening. Me being a real big fan of the long movie, and this movie is the longest movie, I think, that is nominated this year. Mm-hmm. It feels like it. It feels like it. Whatever. That's good enough. And so, for me, this film gets real high marks across the board in most categories, I think. I find very few faults with this film. And, I think that there's so many great things about it. Scenes just come to mind that just, blow me away, blow me out of the water. And I feel like out of the thematic content of all the films that we've seen this year, this one strikes at the heart at the most, and also gets to the deeper level in a more naturalistic and more convincing way than some of the other films that we've talked about. And mm-hmm. I think that even though Power of the Dog is my main comparison for this film, I've got another one that I will pull up later that I want to talk about and think about, because I haven't totally decided on what my opinion on it is. But we will get to that when we get to that. Tanner, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just going to end up parroting a lot of what you guys have said in your opening statements, because I think this is a very deeply impressive and nuanced and really detailed film. Just because, like a lot of you guys said, there is a lot of subtlety here, a lot of subtlety in how the story is not an original. It was adapted from a story called Men Without Women, which is actually only 40 pages long. So there's a lot of extrapolation going on here.
Yeah.
Lots of extrapolation going on here. And I think it's done very well. I think the writing is very clearly the strongest aspect of this film, for which this film did earn an Oscar nomination for adapted screenplay. But I think all the performances nail that the tone of that writing. I think Hamaguchi absolutely knows what he's doing behind the camera here, but when he sorry, he did write it. Okay, I was just double checking there a second. When what he's doing behind the pen and behind the camera, he knows exactly what he's doing. It's very deliberate, and it knows what it's asking of its audience, and I think that's very interesting as well.
Here's the way I think about it, because I agree with you guys. But I think this movie is too smart for me, frankly, and that's kind of the truth of the matter. It reminds me, because I can only speak in terms of video games. For our cinema-inclined viewers, there's this game that just came out called Elden Ring that is incredibly impressive, but for a niche audience. And something that somebody was saying in their criticism of the game was, this is a masterpiece, but often you find a masterpiece in a work that is narrowly focused. And if you fall beyond that narrow focus, you probably aren't going to appreciate the mastery the way you do if you sit at that intersection of creative interests and direction. Because I watch the movie and I'm really enthralled by how it's written, how it looks, and I really don't think on an objective level I have anything to criticize Drive My Car on.
Sure.
But I just find myself feeling on the most subjective level like, you're having a conversation here, and I've gone to college. I'm in college right now, so I know that you're not actually talking about what you're talking about on a obvious level. Subtextually, this movie has so much going on. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I need to watch it 18 more times before I'm able to really dive into that. And that's not a fault of the film. I think it's the film's credit. This, to me, is the epitome of what the Oscars maybe should be. Quality. This is a bar of quality that I don't think these other films that there's up against reach, but for me, that quality doesn't strike me. So I find myself in this peculiar position where I think this movie is close to, if not a 10. But for me, it's probably the least engaged I was out of any of the films we've watched so far.
I don't want to speak for the rest of my rewatch Reno brothers here, but I was really going into this thinking like, oh, okay, often on a rewatch, a lot of the things, even about a dense film, really click for me. And that just didn't happen with Drive My Car. Like, it's still enigmatic in a lot of ways, which I think is really impressive because I've never had that experience watching a film before. You know, often when I rewatch something, I'm A, familiar with it already, and B, familiarize myself with a lot of the aspects I missed, or, you know, things just really click into place. But with Drive My Car, there is so much subtlety and such a subdued nature about the entire 3-hour runtime that just doesn't happen. It's a more challenging film. And Abram, I don't blame you or anyone else in the audience who just couldn't get on board with this kind of thing. I am very happy that the Oscars nominated this for Best Picture. They're branching out their scope of films a little bit. And I'm happy that they are nominating films that are a little more challenging like this. And, you know, obviously, in a moment, we will get into the actual content of the film. But I think it's important to sort of preface this kind of stuff with, like, it is a dense film, it is a subdued film, and it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, as was the case with most things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I want to just the one thing that really stood out to me in this second rewatch. I don't know if it's just my seeing it again, or maybe the personal progression I've been having in film watching. I'm in a class this semester that is like really forcing me to like watch movies and really, really think about them a lot while I watch them. And for this, I got so much more enraptured in the car. The car of this film is such a big and important character. And to me, it is not only just this like, okay, the main character, he drives the car, he loves the car, he takes care of the car, but he can't drive it. And as sort of this amorphous central conflict that doesn't really have conflict, but it's there. Yeah. To me, the whole idea of the film existing so much in the car, there's so many scenes where they're driving this car around, where he's rehearsing his lines while driving the car, puts it into this transitory space. I'm going into media studies brain right now, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. This film exists in a transitory space, both in the actual depiction of our main character driving around. The film takes a lot of, like, there are scenes where the plot points happen off screen. He goes, in the early part of the film, he goes off to a festival.
Vladivostok.
Yeah, he goes to Vladivostok, but we never see any of that. The only scenes we care about are him driving this car. Not only does he drive the car in like real life a lot, but the film exists as a story in this transitory space between two aspects of his life, between his life with his wife and after he's come to the acceptance of his wife being gone, and what all the ramifications of that mean for him as a person, him as an artist, and all of these greater levels. And so for me, watching the film on a second watch, I was able to begin connecting with that deeper level. And I think if I were to watch it a third time, there would be yet another element that I would find really interesting that I hadn't picked out in either of my first two viewings that make it just, I don't know, it's intellectual. It feels like I'm activating my synapses as I watch the film instead of like mindless entertainment, which I think are two totally valid areas of film. But this one satisfies that itch where I'm like, I'm thinking, and I like it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that this film strikes at a deeper nerve because it is going for something so damn subtle. And I remember sitting in the theater watching this, honestly not knowing what the story is about, not even knowing it was 3 hours long, frankly, and being really confused about how these layers of the story and the dialogue from the play and the characters that are doing things in the play, but their lives are meshing with the real actors, and it gets really complicated. I remember being incredibly overwhelmed at first and be like, whoa, okay, is he talking to someone on the phone, or what's this cassette tape? Like, the lines in this play, it's very confusing at first. And so I can understand being incredibly overwhelmed, as I was. But I think what I came to appreciate is how everything is operating pretty much at the same level. Like, there aren't sequences of the film, there aren't characters of the film that feel extraneous to the tone that it is setting up. You don't get bibs and bobs throughout the movie where it is going up and down in tension. Because even on the tense moments, on these big character moments, people die, people get murdered. Like, these are treated with very serious, flat, dry tone that fits exactly the emotions that our main character, Yusuke Kafka, what he's feeling. And the emotions on his face, which you can count them on one hand, 0. This man shows basically no emotions in almost any scenario, and I find something really compelling about that because it puts him in such a different level from all the other characters that we're talking about. We're talking about Will Smith delivering his Oscar lines and Benedict Cumberbatch going over the top, but you get so much character and reaction from this guy by him not reacting to things. And that places the whole movie under this sort of weighted blanket of just like consciousness, and you can see the gears turning in his mind that makes it really engaging to want to piece together. You're like, why is he thinking this way? Why isn't he reacting? Why is he operating on such this interesting low hum that you feel like would be really boring to see your main character just be stone-faced for basically everything? But I think that's part of why this movie is so compelling, is it takes a very different turn. Like, it takes a left turn and then turns around and does a U-turn for making a compelling main character in the way that he's acted. Yeah.
I think Yuzuke as a character is really interesting for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned there, Tucker, is because he's a deeply tragic character, and you're sort of asked to like understand him and how he is, understand him in a lot of different elements of his life. In fact, from the most personal, deep connection that him and Oto have, his wife, that is established in the first 40 or 40 some minutes in this before his wife passes away, and even after that, obviously which comes around in a fantastic scene between him and Misaki at the end, in her sort of snow-covered village that she's from, where this film is tackling so many things. It's tackling, humans as like artistic beings and how we relate to the stories that we tell and how we relate and how actors relate to characters that they portray. Because you're right, Tucker. All the characters in this are playing characters for the most part. Yuzuke is tied to this character of Uncle Vanya, and our character like Koshi is, I don't remember all the characters from the Chekhov play, but it's interesting how they parallel each other, and like you get to see this actor's process, which I feel Hamaguchi is very interested in as a filmmaker, and maybe having some stage experience. I don't really know his background, but those things are tied together, stage and film acting, of course, and what he's saying and how he portrays these characters as, sort of mirrors of the characters that they play in real life is both interesting and shows the talents of Yusuke as a film director, as like a stage director, in fact, and a casting director as well. That he sees these things and his process of like getting these actors to master the work that he has so much respect for, the play Uncle Vanya, and like from the very moments where they're starting out in this square, they're all reading their lines with as little emotion as possible, and they're knocking on the desk when they're done, and that serves both a logistical purpose within the film, because you obviously have all these characters who are speaking different languages, and as Tucker astutely pointed out, which I didn't really pick up on, that is probably to learn each other's like cadence, so you don't necessarily have to understand what the person is saying, but they know the line, and they know when the line ends, and they know when to pick up their line. So it serves that logistical reason, but also like a deeper thematic reason about paring these words down, paring these works down into just the words and filling them in, and really embodying the character that you're going to be portraying on stage.
When I think about this film, because you're right, it's operating on all these like increasingly metatextual levels. Mm-hmm. I think this film feels very literary, and I find myself often wondering if I would have preferred this as a book, not as a short story, but as a book, as Drive My Car, the novel. Because when we're sitting in that back seat and we're talking with the younger actor about Oto's stories, and he's sort of talking about how it's a line to the effect of, that's really stuck with me since watching the film, like, to look at somebody, you have to look really hard back at yourself, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And it's the sort of thing where I find myself for the next 15 minutes of screen time, 20 minutes of screen time, being like, the fuck did he mean when he said that? Because I really want to get deeper inside of this material, which is so deliberately chosen to operate on a plot level, on a stage level, but then also on this thematic level, as you're saying, Tanner, that I was thinking, why isn't this a book? But I think the real secret component, if we're talking about restraint, it's not really in the screenplay, it's in the actual filmmaking, which I actually think is what sells this as being more than just an excellent script, because it's the ways that shots are framed, sometimes so far away, so detached from the action, and sometimes so close. Or we cut to the insert shot. I love the shot of the cigarette in the snow towards the end of the film. Like, there is so much meaning that is layered into the narrative here because of the filmic qualities, that it is more than just that script. I don't think it would work as well if I was not seeing this, even though it is, in large part, sure, there's an interesting match cut here. Sometimes the camera moves in a compelling way, but it is very static a lot of the time. That static element is integral to at least bringing idiots like me into this narrative and these themes on a basic level.
As much as like the performances and the directing of the film in terms of the acting are subdued, I think that you're exactly right that the filmmaking matches it. There are no flashy sequences. There are none. There are no sequences that stand out above any of the rest. I think when you're talking about like the filmmaking, where you're like, okay, they obviously prepped a lot more for this scene. They obviously like tried a lot harder. I don't feel like any of that is present in the film. There are, of course, scenes that stand out. Like you're talking, like when the younger actor and Yusuke are in the car talking, and man, that is an extraordinarily powerful scene. And you can only really get to how powerful it is once you start noticing the subtle changes in, okay, we're going from a shot that is not straight on. And now, as the conversation moves, that camera shifts, and now we're in between the two characters looking, and they're looking right down the barrel of the lens as they deliver these lines that are connecting them personally, but also connecting to us as an audience. And so I think that like the filmmaking is so deliberate, and even if it doesn't seem like every shot was meticulously crafted, I absolutely think that everything was thought through at a really, really extensive level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no way that there wasn't, because there's a level of mastery going on here in the filmmaking, as Abram was saying. But I think it is in the BLB word, subtleism of the filmmaking that to me is what ends up selling it. Is because it's not flashy and because it doesn't draw attention to itself almost at all, you're able to drill in totally on the characters. You're not talking about a memorable scene from this movie because it's the montage scene. You're not talking about a memorable scene from this movie because it tries something really cool with a dolly zoom or something. You're talking about a memorable scene in this movie. For me, the most memorable is it's a scene but just between two characters. That is the dialogue that I think exemplifies a lot of the themes of this movie as I want to get into, which I believe are connection even past the language barrier. Is when the mute woman Yuna and the young Chinese actress, no, I think she's Taiwanese.
Janice.
Yuna and Janice have that moment in the park together, and they are acting towards us, not towards their audience, and they have the most human and personal connection moment in the film through a script, through their discussion without the context of anything larger than them just being actors connecting to one another, and it just sells me on every possible level. The emotion, the idea that they are communicating in different languages but still understanding each other on an emotional level. It's because this is just a static shot. There's no editing. You're not cutting in on their faces. There's no reaction shots to the people behind them. You are absorbed in just their emotions with one another. And I find that really, really fascinating how so subtly they're able to connect you straight to the minds of these characters.
This film, in some ways, this film maybe is entirely all about acting. In both why it's
all about Eve, man.
In why it's so appealing, and in that it's a lot about theater. And I think that the choice to make this as a film, like Abram was saying, really highlights some of the theatrical elements of this production and really brings to light the theater of the film in a way that most films, I don't even think dare try to do, especially with theater, because, we're not making theater. We have to differentiate ourselves. We're doing film. You know, you have to be on this like separate level, even though they're very related artistic mediums. And I think that Hamaguchi as a director navigates that really, really well and is super, super epitomized in the last scene with between the mute character and between Yusuke on stage as opposed to when they're off stage. I think that it's just super, super profound in what they're saying as it applies to both their characters within Uncle Vanya and within the greater context of the film. And that it's silent too is pretty sweet, I think. I think it's good sound design in those moments.
Speaking of that, Yuna, the mute woman character, I also have a personal favorite scene, and it's the scene where her and Yoon-soo, her husband, who is also like on the advisory board or the production side of things for this play, he's giving Yusuke a ride back home, and he's like, I have to tell you something. There's something pretty important to my involvement in this production that you need to know about. And he gets home. And Yuna is waiting outside, and Yusuke and Misaka they're like, or Misaka's not like that, but she's just there, and she's like, we need to talk about Misaka because we haven't really addressed her at all. But my favorite scene is that entire dinner scene between the four of them, just because on a very base level, it is like the two most wholesome and like ray of sunshine characters in the film, juxtaposed with the two most cynical and cold and like tortured characters in the entire film. And the juxtaposition there is really interesting in the dialogue and how Yusuke is sort of trying to like keep up with this conversation and share along with these things, but he's making little like social faux pas and stuff like that, like. He there's some mistake that he makes, like a little something with Yuna and and even like the connection between Yuna and Yoon-soo, where he's like he has a great line that's like, I knew if she moved here that no one would be able to understand her, no one could hear her, but I thought I could hear her like 100 people could, and that is just
listen to her with the level of 100 people or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That is just like a very saccharine and deeply romantic line, and I think that's really powerful. And then you have, of course, the thing of Misaka, like she's like disconnected from this whole conversation, so she just like starts playing with the dog or whatever. I think that says a lot about her character, that she's like watching this like very deep social interaction go on, and she's like, I don't want to be a part of it, so she just plays with the dog. I think there's a number of key scenes that play out like that and tell you so much about all of these characters and fill you in about the background of these characters. Of course, you know, like you learn she was like a ballet dancer and she had a miscarriage, and then like she couldn't perform anymore. But then she met Yoon Soo, and he brought her on board to this thing, and now she's really discovering her love of performance and connection again. I think it's all really, really fantastic.
I'm looking towards Abram, because I want to hear from him after we've expounded so much on all these elements, but I want to know your thoughts a little more.
Well, I was really just participating in the silence to see what would happen if nobody answered after Tanner, just to know, a little bit of a pregnant pause for audio listeners. But no, I love that sequence. I think my favorite sequence comes towards the end of the film, when things start to actually happen, and we learn a little bit more about Misaki's life. I think it's hard to really know what the heart of the heart of a dead corpse, pretty much, like nothing's really beating here, especially strongly. So where's the center? Where's that life? I don't know. I say it might be in Misaki, because I think the sort of mystery of unraveling who she is ends up being the most compelling part of this movie to me, as she sort of backfills information. And I love when she takes Yusuke to important places to her, and we cut to the dump, and we've got the big trash claw picking stuff up and moving it around. And that to me kind of highlighted why I think this movie is so rich, but also just so much. So I just bounced right off of it. Because I feel like I'm sitting in my English lecture hall again, and this is where my teacher, it's an Irish man, he'll stop it and he'll go, all right, and then he'll start talking at us, and we'll find all this depth in these frames, because it's all there. But I don't know if that's how I watch film, because I learn about her history and her life, and I want to maybe see it more than we do. I want to maybe see more of this movie. And I think that's where my personal disconnect comes from. Because we talk about these scenes, or we talk about this rich history of characters, whether that dinner sequence, whether about Misaki, and there's certainly a power in, if you're such a deliberate filmmaker, telling instead of showing. But maybe if they had shown a little bit more throughout Drive My Car, I would have connected to it beyond these are really interesting words you're stringing together. And if I could pause this movie and really think about what you said after basically every line of dialogue, I could connect to it more. But I can't do that. So what if the film was a little bit more visual in that respect? So we talk about visual restraint, but what about a little bit more visual freedom to I don't know if I want to see her past. I don't want a big action set piece where a house gets smushed, right? But maybe just something. I don't know. It just feels like there's a dimension that I grasp onto in film, more of that audio-visual experience of grandeur, or of a little bit more emotion that's just not here on purpose. But Misaki begins to unlock it a little bit. And that's when I found myself most engaged.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about what this movie does with its limited everything. Let's be real. I mean, no over-the-top editing, no over-the-top cinematography, all these things I think are benefits to the film. But I think, and I just want to kind of unlock what I think is the key of this film, which is that theme, the theme of communication past the language barrier. And what you're talking about, and the fact that it's not, film is a visual medium, and we're very used to films leaning very heavily into that. But this film is like a stage play. It's people standing or sitting in front of cameras with just using their emotions and their words and the context of their dialogue to convey a story. There's no elaborate sets. There's no elaborate sequences where characters are doing anything particularly interesting. I mean, even the most interesting ones happen off screen, such as the younger actor and accidentally killing someone, beating up someone, or even Yusuke going to Vladivostok. I mean, that could have been an interesting scene. But the idea that this film is flat, it is dry, and it is intended for you to connect only to the dialogue of the characters and the performances, even when it is the lack of overt performance from the actors, I think is really fascinating. And tying that all together with the play, which I think is one of the most interesting, unique aspects of this film. A play that is adapted from a Russian play, I believe, and it is being presented in Japan by a Japanese director with a multilingual cast, most of whom cannot communicate with one another, but can come to some sort of artistic center to work together to convey a story through emotion, past words. And I think there's a really powerful idea about communication there and connecting to someone on a personal and human level and listening, even if you can't comprehend what they're saying, trying to understand emotion and history. And I think that's really, really powerful.
And Tucker, what language is this film primarily in? Did you understand most of the words by listening to them?
No, exactly.
And so that thematic idea extends metatextually past the very content of the film into your own experience of it.
It extends past the 1-inch barriers, as I believe a very wise man once called them.
Once said, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as an empath, I didn't need any of the dialogue to
That's a
understand
great
what
point.
characters were thinking or feeling.
That's a fantastic
Any
point.
commentary on my thematic reading? Do you guys agree with that?
no,
or
I
certainly
like it a lot, Tucker.
Yeah, I certainly think that there's a lot of material in the film that supports it, as there is a lot of material that supports a lot of other thematic readings. Because as we said, this is a very deep film. But Tucker, you saying that made me want to point out just a quick little thing that that theme can sort of bring about very deep and meaningful conversations about communication and conversations themselves. But it can also bring about funny little jokey moments, like the moment where Yusuke and Koshi, the younger actor who kills someone in this film, Koshi's kind of he was like a very well-known actor who then had a relationship with a minor, got dropped by his talent agency, and sort of went independent and started and really came back with the stage production. And he's sort of he gets around if you pick up what I'm putting down here a second. And Koshi's like, oh yeah, I wasn't like I was just lending an ear to Janice, you know. I didn't mean anything by when I was getting a car ride from her like that. And Yusuke is like, oh, you were lending an ear, huh? You don't speak Mandarin, and she doesn't speak Japanese, so how exactly was that working? And he's like, and he like says like half a sentence, and Yusuke is just like, just be careful, okay, with whatever you're doing, because I think Yusuke and Koshi also have a very interesting relationship between them, because Koshi was the last. Well, no, he wasn't the last person, because Yusuke and his wife slept together before she died. But he was the one who Yusuke walked in on his wife and Koshi having sex,
Going at it big time.
Yeah, exactly. And you know the ramifications of this are given to us a little bit throughout the film, whether it's, you know, the scene immediately following her death where they're at the funeral and Koshi is just like, it's like very panically staring across the room at Yusuke, or they're that like enthralling scene when he's like recounting the rest of this like TV pilot that Oto was writing to him, which she can only come up with after she's had sex with somebody.
I can't believe I didn't get the implication of that the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, he's like recounting the story. Okay, cool. He knows the story. And then I was like, oh, duh, he knows the story, because he is admitting. He is admitting in that moment to having slept with Yusuke's wife.
It's a double betrayal, because Yusuke doesn't know that Oto tells people stories after she has sex with them. He thought that was just a thing, but other than him. And it's a double betrayal there, because not only is this guy telling him to his face, I had sex with your wife, but also that she shares that same connection with other people. And
shares the end of the story with Koshi and not with Yusuke. I think it's a really interesting a point to that as well.
And I think that's another that's a point for this film being about, you know, grief and letting people go and like moving on with your life, because I think that the whole final scene between him and Mizaki at the end in the snow there, which I think is brilliantly shot, and there's something I wrote it down here. Yusuke was so caught up in trying to figure out Oto that he forgot to grieve her, really. And he let he says the line, I let something genuine go. he was so obsessed with like trying to figure her out and like decode her as a person that he ignored the connection that they shared that is now gone.
Yeah, well, you bringing up this grief and this loss goes to this other thematic idea that I find myself latching onto a lot in the film. I think Tucker's exactly right. It's a lot about communication. I think in maybe, I don't know, let's say in our non-specific order, our A plot and our B plot. These are two things that I think are equal in the film, and they support each other as thematic ideas. But the loss of the film and how do the characters overcome it? They talk to each other. It's mostly Yusuke and Mizaki. It is what connects them as characters. And where do they connect? In the car. Just a little, side note, the car is important and it's great. And if you want to hear my thoughts about the car, I won't repeat them. Go watch the Backlog Banter episode because I started off. You don't even have to watch the whole thing. It's right up at the beginning. But the loss that these characters feel and the ways that they overcome it through talking to each other about it, I think is just a really human and a really genuine portrayal of life and the way that people truly exist. Even people who will never show emotion, they still got to figure it out too. And this film maybe has a little golden heart to it that even if you don't show emotion, you too can figure out your grief and maybe come out a little bit okay on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the connection between Wataru and Yusuke is the core of this film, and it doesn't feel like that for the most of the runtime because you're so focused on Yusuke getting set up in the drama of the of directing the play and choosing the actors and stuff like that, which I think is a compelling story and definitely works for him. But it's when Wataru starts to open up to him, and the two of them share moments in the car, learn more about each other, and come to realize that this person is more interesting and in depth and connectable than I initially thought. Me projecting as an empath through the eyes of the characters, and then near the end, when they ultimately go on a very long trip together to her home village, and both of them have a moment they allow themselves to give into grief, and the moment that essentially ends the film. I mean, there's like a montage afterward, but that where they embrace on a snowy hill, and you just see that for like 30 seconds is another one of those very powerful, simple human connection moments where these two people who haven't known each other for a super long time, but are able to connect to each other on a very personal level, have that full moment of connection. I think, again, I'm saying this a lot, but it's very powerful to watch that relationship develop so slowly, because these are both people who are just walled off to the nth degree, and they do not want to share their emotions, and they don't even really show their emotions fully in these powerful emotional sequences, because that's just their personality. But you are able to watch these walls be chipped down over time as they learn about each other, and then the hug happens, and you're like, that's it. They know each other, and I think that's really powerful. Yeah.
Abram, you had something to say, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's about all of that stuff, but for me, on a personal level, it feels like the movie's about art. And it's about the role of art in its ability to sort of mediate those conversations about that grief, or to bridge these barriers between people. I mean, we learn about the younger actor. We learn about what he's done wrong. We learn about it like offhand. It's not a conversation he has with Yusuke where he's confessing directly. He never directly confesses to things. We talk about subtextual confessions, but it's actually like a report over an intercom on a ferry where we learn that he might have been a pedophile, right?
Yeah.
But they relate through narrative that they tell each other, and there's that really interesting line where Yusuke is talking about, like, I don't think I can go back to this role, to the uncle role, because I can't give myself to that character again. And we see him after he performs, he always comes off and basically collapses. Like the weight of embodying that narrative is so heavy on him physically, and he becomes so joined to it that it's inescapable. It's sort of like when you can't escape through escapism anymore because it's too powerful, it's too resonant. And I think that for me, if I got much of anything out of the movie, it's that this is this is a powerful narrative that can be used in somebody else's life as the play is used in these characters' lives. As a vehicle, no pun intended, for the understanding of grief through the power of the artistic medium itself.
Yeah.
So I found that very, very interesting.
It's all transitory, man. It's all transitory. What can I say?
God dang it. Back to your transitory nonsense. Which, by the way, I think is true. I'm just being a dingus.
And I think Abram, you're totally right. The fact that not only does theater factor in so heavily into the plot, but also to the characters. I mean, I think everything in this film really revolves around like the creation and the presentation of art, and how these characters themselves relate to and embody the characters in the film. And then I love that this film just shows us the performances. That is like, okay, you love these performances of these actors acting as film actors, and now you get to do it again, but they're acting as theater actors, totally different.
Yeah.
They're doing and you get to hear all that and see it too, or see it also if we're talking about like Yuna in that last scene, which I think is or the last scene of Uncle Vanya, not the last scene of the film. I think is extraordinarily powerful and really connects a lot of these messages. Maybe that the theater acts as a connective tissue between the loss and the conversation, and is the place where art happens. I have a little personal connection to Uncle Vanya. I've seen the actual play. It's a really, really good play. I mean, it's Chekhov. I mean, he's like a master playwright, so it's like no complaints there.
And he has all those guns or whatever. The thing about him.
The Chekhov's gun is from this play. I think at least.
Yeah, people do shoot each other in the play. I do remember that now.
Yeah, and so just seeing not only the play but the rehearsal and the recontextualization of a pre-existing literary work beyond this short story that the film is based on this other entire thing that brings with it all this thematic and emotional baggage really adds to the film. And I think that because there really is so much going on elsewhere in the film that isn't really relating to the play itself, if you don't know Uncle Vanya, you can sit there and listen to those lines or read the lines on subtitles and be like, this speaks to what's happening in the film, or maybe this speaks to what's happening in my life. And you don't even need to go beyond that and be like, oh, and it's from this part in the play and the thematic, blah, 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 like connecting it literary-wise even farther. I mean, maybe if you don't really like plays, that's a minus, but I think that it factors into the film in a positive manner overall.
Yeah, so, I mean, an interesting thing that you said there is talking about connection to the art form of plays. I don't like theater. I don't like plays, which is a little bit ironic because my dad is a playwright and I've been to a lot of plays and musicals in my day, but I just don't really find live performance particularly compelling, just for whatever dumb psychological reason. I hit my head on the ground too many times when I was a kid or whatever. But one thing I find interesting about this film is, frankly, I don't care about Uncle Vanya from a plot perspective. I don't really care how this play works in the world and then the people watching it. But what I like about the idea of the play is that is told multiple languages. As I said, that obviously ties in. It's sort of the core of the communication theme. But in the way that you are able to see these characters connect to one another through this slow process of learning how to do this play. It is that's the most of the movie, runtime wise.
Yeah.
Is watching them sit in these practice rooms and eventually graduate to acting with each other and using the very stringent and structured learning process to learn the dialogue so they can communicate without the language. I think is a very fascinating process to watch, even if I don't care what the characters are saying. Like, I can just turn my brain off when they start reading their lines because I'm like, I'm never going to really be able to piece together what's happening in this play. And if I try too hard to figure out what's going on in the background with this play, it's just going to confuse me. But I'm able to turn my brain off for that segment, but pay attention to the way that the characters are reacting when they are critiqued about doing something good or bad with their performance, or their frustration with the learning process, or their frustration of not being able to directly communicate with each other because of the language barrier. Those are things that connect to me on a thematic level, because as I've sort of come to terms with throughout this conversation, I think this movie is at its best on that thematic level. Just the idea of communication is so fascinating to me as someone who likes talking to other people. Sometimes it depends on the day. But using that process, that theme of overcoming your frustration with communication is something that I think we can all apply to our lives and makes this film very resonant to me.
I would say that those play scenes are still really important because it says a lot about how our characters embody the characters that they are portraying on stage. And I think that to Abrams' thematic reading, the one that he brought up about art, this sort of falls in that camp that Hamaguchi is sort of saying that people are intrinsically artistic and creative and stuff and things of that nature. Like, and I think that really comes across in how important messages in this film, like the final scene of Uncle Vanya between to use the character names, Yusuke and Yuna.
Yeah.
Between like Vanya and like a cousin or something.
Sonia?
Yeah, Vanya and Sonia. Yeah, that's right.
I could not tell if she was supposed to be his daughter, his wife, his mother. I have no idea.
She's a family member they are connected by a non-sexual, like non-romantic love between each other in the play. That's like the most important thing you need to know. They are like bonded, connected characters in a like shared experience, like sort of platonic, but like beyond. Like imagine platonic squared or cubed, whatever. That's how they're related.
Oh, let's not bring math into this, please.
What I was saying before we got weighed down by mathematics was that I think it's important how Hamaguchi says that the characters in the film embody the characters they play on stage, and what the connection is there, and why they are portraying these characters is important. I'm sure that if I was familiar with Uncle Vanya, it would hit a lot deeper. But there is just something about, at a certain point, the characters become inseparable from the characters they portray on stage, which is why I think it's important for Yusuke to come back to that role of Uncle Vanya, because it is so meaningful to him, and eventually it becomes meaningful to the audience as well. You get the impression that Vanya is this very tortured man in a lot of respects, and he's weighed down by a lot of grief and depression that he feels just by the weight of his experiences in life, much like Yusuke is. And I think it's interesting how we never see Koshi portray those emotions when he's portraying Vanya. When he's portraying Vanya, it's always like in the audition scene, he's like being violent towards Janice, or he does the scene where he's shooting other characters. I think it's important that we see Yusuke portray those more deeper emotional moments, and Koshi portrays the bigger, more violent things that Vanya does. And I think it ties those two characters, Koshi and Yusuke, together in an interesting way. And it ties back to a question that we don't have to answer here, but like, why did Yusuke decide to give Koshi the role of Vanya? Does he see an element of himself in Koshi? Is it because Oto chose Koshi to sleep with and eventually, as we find out, relay part of this story to? What is the reasoning behind Yusuke's decision making there? I think there's a lot of questions like that are present in the film that tie back to how the characters portray their characters on stage.
Really quickly, I'm going to connect our triumvirate of themes here. The way that Yusuke deals with a lot of his grief, the way that he presents that is through the rehearsals in the car with the recordings of Oto. So so we have the grief and the communication are connected, and then we have the theater and the grief are connected through his rehearsals, which to me often perform as really, really good scene transitions, because we will cut to going in the car and he will read a line from the play that just applies so perfectly to what is going on in the movie. And I'm like, boom, I'm in. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
One of the first ones is one of the first times that we see that happen is like he's driving after he sees Otto cheating on him, and he says, "Of course he's reading lines that are like, "Of course I'm jealous of him. He's always had so much luck with the ladies and stuff like that." I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. We're drawing very thick parallel lines between these practice lines and the experiences of our characters. But I don't think it's overbearing. I think it's very clear in what Hamaguchi's trying to do here, and he accomplishes it very well.
Indeed. Well, we have spent a huge amount of time talking about theme and characters, which really is, as I've gathered, our like connective tissue of the film, what we really like about it. Are there any other elements, Tanner? I believe maybe you've got a little collection of nominations of this film. Besides
I do have some
from
nominations.
Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture, what did the Academy think that this film was deserving of?
So yeah, we got Adapted Screenplay, we got Best Picture, we got Best Director for Hamaguchi himself, and we also have Best International Feature Film.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, believe it or not.
A real
the foreign
shocker
film
there.
nominated for Best Picture is also nominated for
And
international.
seems to be the runaway winner candidate for that category for international feature. Obviously, you know, getting in the Best Picture category sort of locks you in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
At least in previous years, we've seen that be the case. Parasite.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we did. Well, any thoughts, I guess, about the Best Directing nomination? Is there anything outstanding or noteworthy that we haven't covered to you guys?
There's just a lot of pretty shots in this, I think. But that's also credit to the cinematographer, if I can find that person here, Hidetoshi Shinomiya. We're dumb Americans. We're butchering probably a lot of these names. We're trying our best. Please be gentle. We're very, very sorry. But yeah, a lot of very pretty shots in this. I like the one towards the very end where like it's after we get that whole long conversation in the snow about grief and letting go and how Yusuke missed his opportunity to grieve Otto, and it's a shot of the car, the Saab 900 Turbo, and the sun is cresting over that hill, and it slowly bathes the car in this nice golden light. I think it's very pretty. The one where it's Misaki and Yusuke on like those steps by the ocean, also really like that shot. There's just a lot of them.
The one where the two of them share a cigarette and stick their hands out of
that's a classic.
sunroof. It's a great shot.
Even like the first frame of this movie where it's like Otto's silhouette against like the rising sun in their apartment or whatever is great.
Yeah, I mean...
And then you see boobies, so that's great.
Well, yeah. I wasn't going to say it, but...
Someone had to, and I'll take the fall.
Okay,
All right.
yeah.
I will say, the car in this film, we haven't really talked about it as like a character. I think in my second watch, it really does perform a lot more as this vehicle for all these thematic ideas and these, you know, character moments and everything. But man, it's beautiful. Sound design of the car is really nice. It sounds really good. It probably sounds really accurate. I've never heard one of these cars in real life. And there's a certain amount of joy that I get from watching this beautiful, extremely or very zoomed in but very far away shot of a bright red car driving through the Japanese countryside. Just pretty, just eye candy, really.
Yeah. Now I'm sure there's something in here about like you have to give up your creative project like a play or your life even to be sort of driven by somebody else. Sometimes you have to rely on other people and not be a lonesome person who wants to drive your own car. Sometimes you have to let other people drive your car for you and get to know them a little bit while they do it.
So don't drive my car.
No,
Yeah, you can say that to other people.
Car.
Please drive my car.
Okay, it's a command. Drive my
question.
car.
Yeah, well, it's maybe more of a request. Drive my car.
Drive
Would
my
you
car?
kindly? Yeah.
Abram, you had something else to say?
The last thing I was just gonna say, I already kind of sung my praise of the cinematography earlier, but the color grading in this movie is just fucking awesome too. The use of color is really effective, and even just I love those little details that you can see so clearly. It's not particularly portraying to color, but we see the car is so clean, but there's a moment towards the end of the film where we see that the window is dirty. And I just all of these little intentional details we notice. I think that in a film that is this still, it allows you to really hone in on all that stuff. And I do care that it's still on the most subjective level, but on a more objective level, who really cares when you make those reds pop so much, or you're just in beautiful Japan to begin with. It's very cool. And Yuna's husband, that hair.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
nice.
Nice. Abram, I was going to
Exact
ask
opposite of your hair.
If you had any, if you had any favorite character moments, because you were silent for a lot of this review. I feel like that didn't go unnoticed because like you said, you maybe didn't connect to this personally in any way, shape, or form, or maybe you just need to be a cool guy who rewatches it for this one, like us. But do you have any particular character moments that you really enjoyed, or any scenes in particular that sung out to you?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. See, here's my problem, right? It just ends up running together for me. I really felt like I was 30 seconds behind the movie the entire time, trying to cling on to something I just said and unpack it. Because the movie, we talk about how it's divergent in a lot of respects in terms of all of this thematic material it might cover, but it still remains, I think, relatively focused in terms of all of these ideas at least feed into the same bucket. I think we run into an issue with films sometimes where they are so flexible in their thematic content that you can basically think they're about anything. A great example for me is Jordan Peele's Us, which I think that's a really cool movie. But I think it could be about 9 million different things. I don't know if that's intentional. I feel like there's a great intent here. And because of that, I feel like I was able to hone in more, but it is so rich. It feels like every scene is throwing a new idea into the same pot. We're not chucking shit into different pots, but this pot is overflowing with stuff that I couldn't keep up with. But I do love individual moments, like the reveal of the fact that Misaki quote unquote killed her mom, and the line then from Yusuke where he's like, if I was your father, I would hold on to you and tell you it's not your fault, but I'm not, so I'm sitting here and I killed my wife and you killed your mom. Like, there are nice moments like that. Well, to be clear, it's not a nice moment, but it's a nice moment of filmmaking. But I just think that for me, I enjoyed absorbing what you absorbed out of the movie because I absorbed like that much of Drive My Car. And frankly, I think that's fine. As my score is going to show, I'm in a weird position here where I feel like I am so far outside of the movie, but I'm still cheering it on nonetheless.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a very peculiar situation. I mean, I don't watch a lot of movies like this that feel so excellent, but that I have such an indifference towards.
Sure.
All right.
Interesting.
You know, Abram, I don't really want to force you to hold that score in suspense any longer. Let's just punch him in there and find out what this film gives, because I really want to give it a score right now. I'm really into punching in my number, and I hope you guys are too. It looks like a lot of them are pulled up. Should
We're all pulled up.
Hit go.
Let's go.
3, 2, 1.
There we are. Alrighty.
Interesting.
Hey, look at this. Hey, wow. Okay.
A little befuddling, but in a great way. It's a little befuddling in a great way. The average score, 9.6. So this film is going right to the top above Coda. So our two films featuring sign language characters. That was my other connection, by the way. Characters speaking in sign language. Sitting at the top of the Oscars this time around. The point breakdown from the top towards the bottom. Abram with a 9.9, I gave it a 9.8, Tanner gave it a 9.5, and Tucker gave it a 9.1. So not one single score below 9.0. Pretty solidly at the top right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would say.
Interestingly enough, I gave it the lowest score, which I'm
A terrible score from
quite
Tucker.
surprised.
Yeah, obviously, anyone who gives a film the lowest score hates it, as we all know.
As we all know.
But interestingly enough, if I had given this any higher, this would be the second highest overall score we've ever given a movie ever.
Incredible.
Well,
Wow.
Well, how about that? Wowie's
But
out. How
I
about
didn't,
that?
so it's actually tied for third highest
there we go.
we've ever given.
Okay. Well, how about that?
All right.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I think it reflects our conversation that we had here. This is probably one of the it ranges towards the top of some of the deepest discussion and least derailed discussion that we've ever had about a film, I might say.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I think this is a total compliment to the film, but the fact that Abram brought up this thematic idea that I'd never even thought about, and then as he was talking about it, I was like, oh, but it connects to these other two ideas in this, and that, and the fact that I don't think that there's a whole lot. I think there's a lot more in each of those main ideas that we could delve into and talk about for hours and hours. But I think beyond that, the film does feel so focused and does feel like it knows what it's about, and therefore, unlike maybe the bottom film on our list, can't just be applied to anything else, any random thematic idea that you fancy on the given day that you watch it. So, so overall high marks. If you have any final thoughts, I want to hear them. And then after that, I do have a question because I want a little prediction right now. It's
all right.
Okay. But Abram seems like he's got something to say.
I had to read like a little bit of William Faulkner's Sound and Fury for my English class, and like I just don't understand it, but I know when I'm in the presence of a masterpiece. Yeah. And I kind of felt the same way with Drive My Car. As we're talking about it, and as I listen more to you, and as I futz with these hairbands that I got off my girlfriend's desk, and I just think about my experience and your experience, I'm getting it more, and I appreciate that. But even as soon as those credits hit, I'm like, yeah, that movie is. I don't feel like I can give it a 10 because I on the most subjective level disconnected from it. But I would be remiss as the quest for the bestest critic, the preeminent Oscars show on the internet. Yeah. To not reflect what I think is a commanding level of quality here. It's not the Batman, but it's very, very good.
It's very good. I would agree. It gets the BLB masterpiece stamp of approval.
The masterpiece stamp of approval, truly. Okay, my question of prediction. What are the chances that this film actually wins Best Picture? Because as a 9.6, the other couple films we have to watch, we might have just decided the top film of the nominees. Do you guys believe that the Academy will make this win?
No, I don't think so. I think there are two very clear favorites, those being Belfast and The Power of the Dog. I'd say on a list of likelihood, ranging 1 to 10 for the 10 nominees, this is probably like 7 or an 8, probably.
Yeah.
With maybe stuff like I don't know, King Richard being below that, or I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe Don't Look Up.
Maybe Don't Look Up. I don't. But we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out on Oscars night. But no, I will eat my. I'll give a similar I'll give myself a similar conundrum as I gave myself for The Lion King back during the 2019 Oscar season. If this film wins Best Picture, I will eat my shoes, both of them. Those are the exact words that I said when I said I would do that if The Lion King 2019 got any Oscar nominations. I will do the same for Drive My Car. But I will also be happy if it wins Best Picture.
If Lion King 2019 wins any Oscars, I will eat my shoes, both of them.
How did you have that on command?
It's incredible. Tucker's got great powers like that. But yeah, I'd be very, very happy. Don't take that as a negative. I'll be very, very happy if this wins Best Picture. I think it'd be super interesting, but I just don't think it's that likely.
Man, just a real shame. Just a real shame.
I think that if the Oscars were predicated solely on quality, that this should lose only to Dune.
I said we'll get to Dune eventually. We only have a handful of these left. 3 more, in fact. 3 more.
Yeah, I mean that just leads so naturally into what film we are going to be talking about next. Because Tanner, you as the taskmaster of this side quest, do have in your little brain, you know which film we're going to be watching.
I know what film we're watching next, and much to Abram's chagrin, we are not watching Dune next. We are instead watching Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza next. An interesting little film, one that I've seen before, as I've seen all of these now because I'm super cool and rad. But a nice little short reprieve.
Nice one.
This one coming in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, as opposed to this one being 3 hours, West Side Story being like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and Dune being like 2 hours and 35 minutes. A nice little reprieve for us here. Yeah. Have you guys seen Licorice Pizza? I know Tucker has not. Timo?
I have not seen it. I kind of knew it was. I guessed that it was probably going to be nominated, and when it came out, there was some buzz about it. But it to me, it came out rather abruptly. I didn't really see a lot of marketing. I was like, oh, this movie's out now. Okay, and then
you didn't see the trailer with Bradley Cooper going.
Everyone saw that trailer. I think.
Which is apparently not in the movie.
It's not in the movie, unfortunately. Spoilers. But this one is available for purchase on Amazon Prime for a cool, crisp $20, and other methods if you're so inclined.
Goodbye money, I guess. We'll be watching that. I think
I think we'll be watching it.
I think we'll watch it, but I don't have any thoughts about the film. I know nothing about it.
I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it because I quite liked it the first time. I don't know if there's much more for me to get out of a rewatch, but hey, I thought the same thing about Drive My Car, and I was shown up.
And here we are.
I don't think I've ever seen a Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
I think I've only seen There Will Be Blood, and we might get into my thoughts on PTA next episode, but we're gonna save that for next episode because, well, Drive My Car, our new #1 2022 Best Picture nominee. Thank you guys for joining me on this excellent discussion. Truly, truly excellent. I think we reached a new level of high-mindedness,
intellectualism,
of subtleism in terms of the film, and intellectualism in terms of the discussion. Awesome. Thank you for joining me. We're gonna do Licorice Pizza next week. It's gonna be fun. I think this film maybe has a little bit more action, a little more plot going on to it, and I'm all there for that. That's awesome. So let's reconvene then, and we'll talk about it. All right. See you then. Peace.
I was listening to Ave Maria.
Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. This is the podcast where we take a look at all the Best Picture winners, and today we are looking at Drive My Car, directed by Ryuichi Hamaguchi. Of course,
Ryuichi Hamaguchi.
Jesus Christ! I thought you were actually going into the episode.
Yeah, I was not recording.
And then you mispronounced the director's name.
Ryuichi Hamaguchi.
Fuckers in France were disregarding my favorite directors.
What? You cut out. Your mic just went mute.
Yeah.
There we go. Yep, there we go.
He's back. Hey, he's back.
He's back with a fucking screech.